Historically speaking, the ancient men understood the psyche far better than you do now, for they were far more aware of its context. They understood that dreams represent a reality as valid as the physical one, and they did not see the two worlds as separate. Some ancient civilizations, including the Egyptians, knew how to consciously direct dream activity and how to delve into various levels of dream reality, and they were able to use that as source material in their physical world. Healing involves much more than the healing you're familiar with. A healer must be able to work with all levels of the entity's experience, directly helping those reincarnational personalities that are part of it, which involves manipulation through reincarnational patterns. Advanced healers deal with the spiritual maladies of vast numbers of personalities. They are those who combine the qualities of a teacher, creator, and healer. You think of viruses as physical and thoughts as mental. You should know that thoughts also have their physical aspects in the body, and that the viruses have their mental aspects in the body. In very ancient times, medicine men had to perform such acts as part of their initiation ceremonies. The belief triggers body chemicals in a certain fashion, though the process itself involves an interaction between the air and the chemicals of the body, which form together a protective shield that repels the action of the fire. The more powerless you feel, the less able you are to utilize your own healing abilities. You are then forced to project those outwards upon a physician, healer, or any other outside medium. If you make no effective efforts to handle your own problems, then the symptoms will simply reappear in a new fashion and the same process will be reinitiated. You may lose faith in your doctor while still retaining confidence in doctors as a whole and run from one to another. If through the concentrated use of psychic energy your body is cured by such a healer, you will also simply trade those symptoms for others unless you change your initial belief. Sometimes people go on very healthy, strict diets. They drink tons of water and fresh juices, they do exercise, and they visualize with great sincerity and for a long time how they are healthy, and at the end they are still sick or depressed, sometimes even more than they were before they started doing all these things, which every holistic healer will tell you are excellent, very effective, and highly beneficial for sure. So why all these allegedly very powerful healing modalities, often combined, of course, with the most modern herbal supplements which will kill all your free radicals and so on, why they fail to cure so many people? And I'm referring exactly to the modern holistic healing modalities. I'm not talking about the allopathic medicine administered in the hospitals, for example. Or why do we see sometimes people who are practically on junk food diet, they smoke, they drink, and still they are far healthier and happier than many health-conscious people, which scrutinize every single morsel to count its vitamins and carbohydrates and then calculate them according to the daily recommended value? The answer is that some of the modern holistic healing modalities are based on also modern scientific discoveries, and that of course brings about many imperfections. And the good news is that still there are some sources, genuine sources, about how holistic medicine was in the older times, and that, as many things, was far, far better back then than it is now. And this is gonna be a very, very practical video, not at all abstract, full of advices which I hope will be helpful for many people with afflictions or addictions. Towards the end, I will also touch the topics of is it worth being vegetarian or vegan, again from the point of view of the ancient medical knowledge. So what sources do we have? How can we really know how was it really back then? What kind of medicine were they using? Source number one is the Vedic literature, and more specifically Ayurveda. That is the part of the Vedas which deals with medicine. Ayurveda is extremely advanced and complicated science. For example, it uses herbal preparations which are extremely sophisticated and require unbelievable precision to get the right result, and their recipes could not have been obtained by the trial and error method. It could not have been achieved by lots of experimenting, and it wasn't. It was given to the human race by the celestial healer Dhanvantari. But when I say Ayurveda, I mean specifically the Veda which is practiced in India, and not, for example, the commercial label of Ayurveda that you can find in the West. What is the difference? Same as the difference between yoga in India, which is a discipline for expanding your consciousness, which sometimes may involve exercises, and yoga in the Western world, where it has turned into an exotic gymnastics. In case my video inspires you to delve further into the subject of Ayurveda, I would not advise you to trust any book about it written by a Westerner, definitely not. I lived more than 7 years in India. And the only text that I would trust would be a direct translation of the verses of the old text written by a traditional Indian doctor, meant for the Indian public and as old as possible, the older the better. Anything else could be polluted with modern ideas. And the second source of knowledge would be ayahuasca. Some 5 years ago I spent almost 2 years in the Amazon jungle drinking ayahuasca all the time. And first of all, that's an ancient method of healing for sure. And then second is that when one drinks the magical brew, a lot of things from the invisible spectrum become visible, and now and then one can get direct insights of the technicalities of how exactly sicknesses go away, what makes them go away. Often one can observe that in detail in real time. I did not undergo proper training as a healer or shaman because I approached ayahuasca only for personal reasons. But still, by that time, I had managed to get myself into such a serious health trouble that to help me, the jungle spirits had to teach me the basics of why people get into such serious trouble and how to save themselves. Upon my return in Europe, I found out about the books, the Seth books written down by Jane Roberts, which are the best expression in written word of everything I've been shown in the Amazon jungle. And since the Seth books seem to have historic validity for other reasons as well, and not just my personal experience, they deserve to be referenced as well when we speak about ancient healing modalities. So I see three main differences between some modern holistic medicines and their ancient counterparts. First of all, most of the modern ones seem to be based on the assumption that a given condition can have either mechanical or psychological reason. For example, your nasal passages are somewhat irregular by birth, and this causes respiratory or sinus problems. So many modern healers will actually consider this condition to have a physical, mechanical reason, while if you worry yourself into cancer, then they will admit, okay, this condition has a psychological, subtle reason. While from the ancient perspective, everything that happens in this three-dimensional plane is caused by something on the astral plane. Everything without an exception. Even a blade of grass could not be moved by the wind unless there was an astral cause behind it. Even if you accidentally fall down and damage your bone, even that is not by chance, even that is not by accident, and the reason for the event is not mechanical at all. Now I'm just listing the differences, and after that I will go into detail and see what are their practical implications. Difference number 2, which I think is the worst out of all, that is the inability of many modern healers to identify the precise astral cause for a given affliction or addiction. Even in the cases, and I should say especially in the cases in which even these healers themselves agree that the reason for the problem is on the subtle plane. And needless to say, when you can't understand the exact problem, your prospects of solving it are not very bright. And so the person who is suffering is told general stuff like be positive and visualize yourself healed, which sadly in most cases simply doesn't work. If it was that easy to be healthy, people wouldn't allow to get sick to start with. And the third obvious difference is that the actual healing techniques or medicines in the modern holistic branches of healing are very often based on the latest scientific discoveries. And how much truth is there in these scientific discoveries? Judge by yourself, considering that in a couple of decades, it usually turns out that what was considered healthy a few decades ago is actually not. And don't forget that what is being published and presented to the public as scientific discoveries is not always actually that. Often it is propaganda, truth mixed with false statements distributed to the masses for the purpose of keeping them in ignorance. There is no lack of evidence that those who organize all this propaganda love to see us getting more and more sick and enjoy watching how the human gene pool is getting more and more defective. And based on that, imagine what kind of stuff and lies they would be mixing in the publications about what are the actual latest scientific discoveries of what healthy is and what is not. While the older medicines, they were given to humanity by sources, by beings who proved that they are well-wishers of humanity. And this is a quote from this book describing how exactly the transfer of knowledge was taking place. In those early days, men and women did live to ages that would amaze you today, many living to be several hundred years old. That was indeed due to the fact that their knowledge was desperately needed and their expertise. They were held in veneration and they cast their knowledge into songs and stories that were memorized throughout the years. Besides this, however, their energy was utilized in a different fashion than yours is. They alternated between the waking and dream states, and while asleep, they did not age as quickly. Their bodily processes slowed. Although that was true, their dreaming mental processes did not slow down. There was a much greater communication in the dream state, so that some lessons were taught during dreams, while others were taught in the waking condition. There was a greater and greater body of knowledge to be transmitted as physical existence continued, for they did not transmit private knowledge only, but the entire body of knowledge that belonged to the group or tribe as a whole. In other sessions, Seth explained why those higher beings, the visitors as he calls them, decided to transmit knowledge mostly in the dream state. The reason is that in the beginning they tried the direct approach, but some of the locals were too aggressive and would attack the visitors before even trying to understand what is their intention. This video is not in any way a criticism aiming at all the branches of modern holistic medicine. Just on the contrary, there are healers even in current times which get it right, and they heal with the methods of the ancient wisdom. The purpose of this video is to explain how to recognize them amongst the vast plethora of healers who have much more limited scope. Because especially with people with very complicated problems which are difficult to tackle, this could be the only way towards health. Now let's first look into the details of why some, again not all, modern holistic healers are unable to help their patients and advise them properly, even in the cases when they surely realize that the root cause is on the astral plane. Let's take a simple example of a lady from Hong Kong, I believe, who was dying from cancer, advanced stage. She was dead for a couple of hours, not just a few minutes, and she came back to life. This is in the hospital, it's well documented. She came back to life and quickly started healing herself and eventually got free of cancer, just like that, without the help of the so-called cancer specialists from the hospital. So this lady has conscious memories of what happened during these few hours. Basically, she was shown, it was explained to her how exactly she made herself get cancer, and after that, removing the cancer was extremely easy. So what happened to her is that while she was educating herself on how to live healthy life, she got this information that, drinking from plastic bottles can cause cancer because of all these poisons that are coming from the bottles to the water and all the pollution in the air and the food. Oh my God, all the cancer dangers inside the food. It was scary. Dangers from cancer started lurking behind every corner. And it wasn't just imaginary. Just look at the statistics of how more and more people get cancer every year. My God, this is real horror. And gradually, she adopted this horror cancer movie as a meditation target in her life. And since you attract the events on which you meditate, even if you meditate on them with hatred, she did not have to wait long to become a severe cancer victim herself. Now, if she would have visited an average holistic healer before her miracle treatment at that time, since he wouldn't have had the vision to see what kind of ideas in her head are exactly pulling up this relation to cancer, he would have given her general suggestions like visualize yourself healthy and lead healthy lifestyle. And in this way, indirectly, actually, he would have made the condition worse, because by telling her to live healthy lifestyle for her, that would have included avoiding cancer-causing factors. And in her particular case, trying to avoid those factors would have nourished her horror caused by the fear of getting cancer, because it is this horror and fear which are the root cause of the cancer, and not the cancer causing substances in the food, in the water, in the air, and everywhere else. It is not true that these cancer causing poisons are irrelevant. No. Cancerogenic substances exist, however, they do not affect all people who get in touch with them. They affect only those who have an astral contract with the wavelength of cancer. Our hypothetical healer, who would have advised her to live healthy lifestyle, thus encouraging her to avoid cancerogenic substances and thus making her condition actually worse, he did not have bad intent at all. Actually, he wanted to help her. But how could he if he simply didn't have the vision which would allow him to see what exactly astral strings are pulling the events which are causing this sickness, and what kind of astral contracts this soul has? Because it is not random luck which determines in what kind of situation we live and in what kind of body. It is all question of astral contracts. So when the healer doesn't have the power to see what kind of things this lady is thinking and what kind of astral strings she has attached already to her, basically he is unable to give her a proper advice of how to get herself out of this predicament with the cancer. Visualizing ourselves healthy and full of vitality is highly beneficial, but it should not be expected to cure all afflictions. Those who cannot be cured by the simple method of simply imagining that you are healthy, they will require from the individual to find the actual root cause, which in some cases can be quite complicated, but still it can be done. The process is described in this book. Hopefully soon we'll stop hearing stuff like this from holistic doctors. Oh yes, I know about sicknesses with astral root. That means the patient is not actually sick and he should stop imagining that he is sick. And also astral root means that if you stop imagining that you are sick, the sickness is gone. End of quote. As we saw in the example from Hong Kong, although the problem had astral root, the cancer was very much real. It killed the lady, at least for a few hours. Her sickness definitely had an astral root, but she could not cure herself just by imagining that she doesn't have a cancer. Removing the root and pretending that it doesn't exist are two completely different things, and only the first one will bring about cure. There are also isolated cases in which some people by mistake get confused and imagine that they have a given sickness although they don't have it, and eventually they do get it by the power of this meditation, but this is by far not the most common case. These are really exceptions. Another very confusing explanation, which some patients unfortunately have to hear from their healers, is that, you know what, you want to be sick and that's why you are sick. You should stop wanting to be sick and you will be cured immediately. Actually, a healer was trying to preach to me that years ago, and at that time I thought to myself, this person seemed to have some mental disorder. He really believes that people want to be sick. But actually, what he was referring to are the astral plans of the soul when it gets born. And at that time, yes, indeed, our higher self plans all the problems we are getting now. So, on that level, one can say we are sick because we want to be sick. We have custom designed all the problems and sicknesses and other circumstances in our life depending on what we want to learn in this particular incarnation. But the way at that time he was talking about it, it seemed like as if it is some conscious decision that I have taken now. And I thought, that's really weird. I don't think I'm buying this one. I would recommend to all healers, before they start talking big stuff like changing your karmic contracts, to get sure that they have real access to the astral places where such contracts are made and stored. Imagining that you have such access or visualizing it is completely different thing than having it. Because if your access is only imaginary or just visualized, you will be in a position of a person who puts up a sign, I'm a notary, and starts charging people for drawing contracts which are not acknowledged by anybody. I mean, a notary who claims to be notary but it's not really authorized by the government, this is not a real notary. Now, in terms of really canceling contracts, plans of sicknesses that you have made yourself, that you have really agreed to at the time you were planning your life, get sure that when you try to cancel those, you are in the dimension and surroundings where you made them. Because if you just visualize it in your current incarnation, you may be as successful as when you imagine that you have grown wings and you can fly by visualizing it. But no matter how good your visualization was, you may have a hard landing when you try to use your imaginary wings by jumping from the roof. And in general, before trying to follow such advices from healers, think for yourself. These contracts, the plans for sicknesses, they were meant for your education. When you go to school, is your primary goal how to get out of the lessons and run away from school, or is your primary goal to learn something? Also, think very well in what kind of situation end up kids who are always trying to escape lessons instead of actually learning something. Not all afflictions or problems will require that you look for their astral cause and removing. Mostly this is done automatically in the course of your life, but when there is no other way and you have to do that, remember that far less than 1% of the modern healers will be actually able to tell you what is the exact cause. At least the real one. The real one you can find yourself through introspection or in more complicated situations through the help of visionary sacred plants or your personal guardian angels. If we should be looking for a typical example of a scenario of how one gets sick, is, let's say, a chronic feeling of oppression and powerlessness. One feels helpless under the circumstances. Well, since the given person has decided to interpret the situation in such a way, his body will follow, and soon he may find himself taken down by a sickness, by a surprise, as it would appear to him. The actual reason for it wouldn't be that he did not eat well or he caught the virus somewhere. It will be a simple manifestation of his feeling of powerlessness. He gave the order, I'm helpless, and the body simply follows. And one day, when he decides to make a positive use of that situation, instead of feeling helpless, his vitality will be back and his disease will perish. Healthy nutritional green powders and super fantastic combinations of vitamins and minerals will not help him as long as he keeps clinging to that feeling of desperation and helplessness inside. Because it is not your recommended daily dose of nutrients that your body runs on. It runs on pure intention and nothing else. And this takes us to chapter 2, so to say, which deals with the astral origin of all sicknesses, bad luck, good luck, as well as all events and objects in this material world without exception. You are what you eat. What a famous phrase. To be true, it requires a minor correction. You are what you think. That is the truth. All the substances that we ingest, food, herbs, they do affect us without a doubt, but not to the extent to which most people believe. Seth gives the following estimate. You are what you eat is 30% correct, and you are what you think is 70% correct. For example, as the Amazon jungle is being destroyed, the habitat, more and more uncontacted virgin tribes are getting in touch with civilization. And when researchers go there for the first time with translators, what they find is this ancient philosophy still preserved in a capsule. Exactly as the modern people are convinced that the three-dimensional world that you see now out of the window, that is the tangible stuff, that is the anchor, that is the reality. And what you see in your dreams, for example, when you sleep or when you journey with sacred plants or mushrooms, that is some sort of fairy realm which doesn't have much validity outside of the imagination of the person experiencing it. So for the tribal cultures, it is that other astral world which is the anchor, which is the truth, and the game, the theater that we see unfolding in what we call real lives, that is the dream. Absolutely same concept in the Vedic literature, just with much more detail. Over there, they even give specific details of how the material elements and forms appeared around the original astral worlds, how they got practically manifested, engineered, organized, again for the purpose of serving as a stage for this theater performance of the souls who come here to learn. And this situation of our astral body being much closer to our real self than our material body was the first thing that ayahuasca had to teach me personally. Because before that, yes, I would agree with it. I'm kind of a Hindu myself because I have so much connection with India, but it didn't serve much practical purpose to me because one thing is to accept something theoretically, and something else is to be able to use it in your daily life. And that's why I most definitely believe that ayahuasca is not the only way to understand our multidimensional nature and get free of our miseries, but is definitely the fastest. For example, these are some meditation techniques that I recommend. I think they're excellent, but probably if I was doing it the way shown here on this website, it would take me at least 10 years to start perceiving directly things that ayahuasca taught me within 1 year, let's say. Modern people are taught since childhood to fear the subconscious. That's how they're told to call the communication with the other aspects of their multidimensional selves. They are told that these are dangerous waters where normal people should not venture, maybe only some psychiatrist, if there is a special reason for it. And then as people grow up and continue watching TV, this belief is further cemented. Don't you ever try to do anything with your consciousness. This is dangerous. You may go crazy, or some scary spirit may pop out of the dark. You never know what will happen. Better don't go there at all. And to illustrate all this with a very practical example, somebody may continue doing diets and body cleanses and herbal supplements to detoxify their kidneys or liver, but it never detoxifies. These toxins, they just never go away. And in this way, somebody may end up in a vicious circle of perpetual sickness just because he doesn't realize that there is a toxic belief somewhere in his what people call subconscious, but he is not allowed to delve there and identify it. And even if all the herbal supplements and body cleanses he does are good, at the end, new toxins come and accumulate again and again, and the person is in the position like that tailor from the joke who said, I really don't know what's wrong with this trouser. This is some sort of miracle. I measure it 5 times and I still cut it more and more, and it is never as it should be. It is still too short. And to get back to the example of detoxifying one's liver and kidneys with body cleanses and herbs, somebody asked then why that helps so many people. It doesn't help only 30% of the people, maybe it helps 50 or 60% of the people. Actually, that's a reasonable percentage to be expected from a good liver cleanse or kidney cleanse, because we have, let's say, 30% results because of the actual substances, and then the rest of the healing is done by the intention of the people who are doing an endeavor to get healed, and the practical considerations that not all sicknesses are meant to be permanent. Most of them actually, if they're left without a treatment, disappear anyway, because not all astral influences are permanent and always bad. Things change over there. And also sicknesses disappear often by themselves just because the body, which is like an outfit we wear, is such a fine machine that it is programmed to cure itself with time. Sometimes, even when the astral problems behind are not yet solved, such as the wonderful nature of the human costumes which we wear, those of you who might have listened very carefully might be asking themselves, what's going on here? Half an hour she is explaining that the subtle reason for every sickness has to be removed, and then she just said that sometimes the sickness goes away even without removing the cause. Then why bother looking for the astral cause and removing it? The actual truth is that there are too many factors. Things are complicated, and if we try to put them in simple words, things may go very wrong. That's why those people in the ancient times needed a couple of 100 years to mature and put the astral knowledge in songs. One may need a couple of lives, couple of incarnations to develop a certain quality or to learn a certain important lesson. So the higher self might have planned, let's say, 3 lives for a given problem to solve. And in one of the lives, he will be prompted to work on it by the suffering of a given disease to make him think and change his personality. He may indeed voluntarily decide to get sick when he incarnates. But his karmic plan for learning would be just a couple of months of sickness. And when that time is over, he might have not learned his lesson completely yet. He might not have yet developed the quality he wished to perfect, but the lesson is over. He gets cured of his earthly ailment just because the astral task is now on hold. It is pending, it is not active. Now, because modern men demand simplistic explanations for everything immediately, one can hear things like every disease is curable. It's okay to say this in general, but this video is really about the details because some people need them, especially when they're dealing with a chronic and very complicated problem, as I did, for example, 10 years ago. But at that time, there was nobody to explain all this to me in such detail. And at the end, amongst tons of good books and good advice, nothing was working for me and I felt helpless. Ironically, phrases like every sickness is curable, those were making me feel not so good. If everything was really curable, then why I'm trying so hard, I'm trying everything and I can never get cured? Actually, there are no incurable medical conditions in terms of illnesses. That is absolutely true. For every, even the worst terminal disease, you will still find miracle cases, people who cure themselves. But there are people who cannot get cured, at least at a certain moment of time. So we were talking about the types of failures to simplify the truth and put it in a few words. One of them was everything was curable. And another similar one is that man creates his own destiny. Now, that is absolutely 100% true. However, some people decide to interpret this so literally that the end result of their extreme enthusiasm is frustration because events do not unfold as they should be according to their theories. Very dangerous ideas are promoted by people who didn't even care to study what karma is, what is the traditional concept of karma, and despite the overwhelming evidence of karma and even ancestral karma, they are not at all shy to announce to the world that karma doesn't exist because it restricts your freedom and God has made you free. And I watched very carefully such preachers over the years to see, after all, how do they get free of their miseries. And I did not see even a single one of them to be free of those undesirable things which happen as if by chance, as if not invited, by bad luck, as people say. So what is the use of all this talk if they cannot practically free people of miseries and make them as God intended? Usually they would believe in such things during the better periods of their lives, which happens to everybody. As the bad luck comes out of nowhere, so does the good one. And when the lucky days of the karma deniers are over, it is just a question of how honest they want to be with themselves before realizing and confessing that maybe God did not appoint me for supreme advisor of how he should manage his universe, and maybe it's more beneficial to understand how things work instead of expecting them to work the way I imagine. Also, speaking in terms of health, it is true that every health problem has an astral root behind it, but the opposite is not true. One may have many aspects in one's astral personality which would require some polishing, to use mild words, but it is not at all necessary that they will manifest as sicknesses. For example, there are many people who are cruel, rude, dishonest, etc. They may have very healthy lives. Most likely they will have other problems in their life, but there is no such rule in the universe saying that the bad people are necessarily sick. Also, another example, there are people who suffer from very heavy suicidal depressions for many years, and yet they don't necessarily suffer from body sicknesses. The ways of karma are not as simple as most modern men imagine them to be. So basically, good health and well-being are a result of positivity. But true positivity results from direct perception of our blissful eternal nature. To only theoretically believe that our nature is such is not enough. Since our ideas about so many things have been distorted from childhood, sometimes we even manage to distort the idea of positivity, and as the really wise saying says, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. For example, I've met people who are alcoholics and interested in spirituality, and of course, since they are alcoholics, they surely have some type of severe suffering in their life. The type of suffering can vary, but it will be always there. So even those amongst them that are aware about this relation between alcohol and the particular problem that they're having, still some of them fall into this trap that, okay, you see, you have to love everything, you have to be positive about everything, so I love my alcoholism. It is perfectly fine because everything is fine and everything is beautiful in this world. So the suffering they experience is also beautiful according to that philosophy. Well, if they believe in that, they will be allowed to enjoy it to the fullest. Until one day they realize that not everything is beautiful. At least the way they understand it. In some higher sense, yes, everything is beautiful, but not in the practical sense that they need to be applying in their life. Another example, I've seen people even lose their sense of compassion because of misinterpreting the idea of loving everything and everybody. I've even met people who have managed to convince themselves that there is no suffering in the world at all. Like those wars that happen or not happen somewhere, that is mostly like media exaggeration. It almost like it doesn't exist. The crime as well, that is all exaggeration. And since problems don't even exist in their mind, they gladly actually support those wars which are taking place. We were near Syria just a few months ago. We saw the miles-long camps with real refugees, this time really real. And in Africa could be even worse because from there they're not even telling us when they wipe out millions. But the point is that this is financed voluntarily this time with the taxpayer money of the people who see no problem in it. So basically they decide to bury their head in the sand and not see what they are financing so that they can cling to their idea of positivity. But the universal consciousness doesn't bury its head in the sand. And when one day the positive thinkers come to experience themselves what they have previously financed for others, they may not find it that enjoyable. Healthy diet is not the most important factor for our health, but still it deserves to be mentioned. So I'm just gonna do quick remarks, again using the same sources as before. First and foremost, if you're healthy, you don't need to change your diet unless you're using some technique for rising your vibrational level, like for example meditation. In that case, diet change can be your friend, definitely. Or in case you plan having kids in future. Because it works like this. Let's say you are on mostly junk food diet. That's how the health conscious people would call it. But you're fine. That means that your body has actually adapted to this diet. And if you're happy with your life and the level on which your body is functioning, I don't see why you should make any endeavor to switch to healthy eating. But your future children may not think so, and maybe for their sake you may consider cutting off sugar from your diet because that is going to influence their genes as well. Now, a few practical points to consider for those who have decided that they're not gonna eat junk food. Fortunately, there is great abundance of dietary advice in the modern holistic world, and the good news is that this time I can give you a very simple and effective formula. If the diet which you're considering is advising you mainly to grow your own food or pick it from the wild, you're on the right way. Or if your dietary advisor source is telling you to concentrate on reading labels with descriptions of amounts of carbohydrates and fibers and antioxidants and so on, then you better find another source for dietary advice. Should you become vegetarian? I would say the prime factor is your ethnic origin. If you're Indian, yes. But if you're a Western-born person, then it depends. If you feel that you should be a vegetarian because of compassion to the animals, go for it. But without thinking that those who are not vegetarian are cruel people, because the plants that you're eating also experience form of suffering when they are being harvested. If you consider becoming a vegetarian because that will be better for your health, I would say it's pointless because vegetarians are not healthier than non-vegetarians. And as far as becoming vegetarian to raise the vibrational level of your body, in this regard, things are not like black and white. It will depend very much on your level. I would advise you to read at least the 6 core chapters of Gita. The link is found in the description as well. In those chapters, you will find the Vedic definitions of what higher and lower vibrations mean. Just I beg you to avoid any other translations of Gita because there is weird stuff in the West under the name of Bhagavad Gita. The Vedic terms are Sattva Guna for pure existence and Tamaguna for existence in darkness or low vibrations. Actually, in the Vedic society, not everybody is advised to become a vegetarian. Pure vegetarians have to be only the Brahmins, the priestly class, the highest. For them, it's a must, because they have to be in pure Sattva Guna. But again, as we come even one step down to the Kshatriyas, the ruling class, they can hunt and eat whatever they have caught. So again, we are not talking about pure vegetarianism. And then the lowest classes of the Vedic society, these are people who spend most of their lives in Tamaguna. They have so much darkness in their body that even if they become vegetarians, that may not make any practical difference for them. While on the other hand, if somebody has already reached purified state of existence, for him becoming a vegetarian can be highly recommended, or even it could be a must in some cases. But if one is at those levels, he may not even need advice on how to eat anymore. Usually he would be able to directly perceive the effects of every food on his body. Now, as far as vegans, they are very similar to vegetarians, but they don't eat things like eggs and milk products. As far as not eating eggs, I don't see much point in doing that unless you are Hindu, because then it's a question of respect to your roots. But as far as the reason for which Western vegans do not eat eggs, it seems to be one of them, for example, is to stop the egg production industry and in this way prevent the destruction of the Amazon forest. I'm not at all convinced that all the factors contributing to destruction of the rainforest have been reckoned when this claim was made. And also, my neighbors have free-range chicken. They love them. They care very well for them. They do not give them any chemicals. They have no connection to the Amazon forest. And yet the vegans will not eat their eggs as well. Instead of the organic eggs of happy chicken from my neighbor, the vegan would rather go to the store and purchase, let's say, a cereal just because it has labels of vegan and wool meal, and maybe even organic label. Now, the wool meal and organic labels are in many cases actually meaningless. Organic labeled foods have been again and again tested in laboratories and found out to be way more polluted than non-organic in many cases. And as far as wool meal, maybe those grains were indeed wool meal once upon a time before they were processed by the machines, but now they are dead matter as every other processed food. But the vegan would rather buy that than the happy eggs, and thus support the corporate food poisoning paradigm, which the vegans claim to be fighting. So sometimes I'm puzzled by the vegans. And as far as not eating milk products, okay, there is no harm, the body will adapt to that, but I don't see why should they deprive their body from yogurt made of the milk of a real free happy cows and real life traditional culture for the yogurt, which is really good for your digestion. So I understand the logic of the vegans when it comes to eating the yogurt made of the milk of abused and sick animals. But as far as rejecting the yogurt made of milk of happy cows, I don't think that's right. And according to Ayurveda, such milk products of happy cows, they nourish even man's intelligence. There is a very fine borderline between educating oneself about what is toxic and harmful in our environment in order to protect ourselves and drowning in unnecessary negativity. If one has the overall feeling that he lives in a world full of injustice, pollution, and oppression, and these circumstances are stopping him from having a fulfilling life, then the power of this conviction that he has will manifest in the real world either as some sort of sickness, which will really limit what he can do in his life, or it may get manifested as some sort of, as they say, unfortunate circumstance, which again will limit his possibilities and make his life even less enjoyable. If it does manifest in the form of sickness, the doctor may say that this sickness is caused by these and these toxins, but the toxins as such will not be the actual root cause, because millions of other people most likely are exposed to the same toxins to even greater degree, but they don't get that sickness. A very practical illustration from my own life. Many years ago, I had terrible reactions, maybe something like allergy to smoke. Even a very small exposure to cigarette smoke would give me extreme body reactions within seconds. In those times, we didn't have those anti-smoke laws like now in Europe, so practically my access to all public areas was very limited because they were all full of smoke. Even most simple things that I wanted to do were difficult. The reason, which I did not understand at that time, for this, let's call it allergy, was my conviction, my belief that smoking is a disgusting, harmful habit. So there was no cure for this problem, and the situation stayed as it was for years until I did not go to Peru, where the tobacco was treated as a sacred plant. And indeed, some of the terrible stuff which the shamans pulled out of my body, they did that using mapacho, that's how they call it, mapacho smoke. And then I started changing my attitude towards tobacco. After all, it wasn't the tobacco itself which is the reason for the harm that smoking is causing. It is all the toxic additives that the tobacco processing companies put in the final product, not the tobacco plant itself. Yes, excessive smoking addiction can also be harmful, but this doesn't mean that smoking has to be excessive. This is not a reason to hate it. Same with honey. If you eat too much honey, that will also harm you seriously, but this is not reason to hate honey. So as I was examining my beliefs in Peru, I also thought, actually, I don't have anybody who is near to me and smokes. Is it really justified to hate smoking just because somewhere poisons are being added to tobacco? I'm not exposed to that anyway. Why make myself part of a movie which I don't belong to? In my movie, pure tobacco, direct from the garden, is actually helping me. And as my negativity towards tobacco disappeared, so did the bodily symptoms caused by it. I don't feel sick when people around smoke. But this example should not be misinterpreted in the sense that everybody who has this aversion or fanatic hatred towards smoking will necessarily become sick because of it. It may manifest in a completely different area of their life, or it may not manifest at all. In the cases in which the souls have completely different plans for their current incarnation, they are focused on developing completely different qualities or skills. The problem with many modern holistic streams is that they simply do not stand true to their very name. They will enthusiastically spin stories about the effects of vitamins, which have been proven to be pretty much useless decades ago by many studies, even mainstream, but will forget to even mention topics like protection from harmful frequencies, the actual effects of alcohol and caffeine addictions, or the difference between really pure food and the food labeled as organic or healthy or whole meal in the shops. And these are major factors, so major that for some people even a single one of them will be more important than nutrition. Many modern branches of healing which consider themselves holistic will have the nutrition as their main pillar. They try to minimize the importance of otherwise major factors to the point that I don't see how we can call them even holistic, means thinking about the big picture. And even within the world of nutrition itself, they again often exaggerate the importance of minor factors, completely ignoring the major ones, which shouldn't be if they were truly holistic, means taking into consideration the big picture. Eating properly is not the most important for being healthy. As we said, it's 1/3 of the story. But many modern nutritionists don't even pay attention to the big story within the world of nutrition itself. They often even miss the most important point, which is that if you want real food, you have to either grow it yourself or get it from somebody you know personally or collect it from the wild. In most countries, the food that you get, labeled as organic or in the health stores, is not in any way different from the obvious junk food. Because of the extensive labeling fraud, because the legal definition of organic is not what most people understand to be organic, because treatments with various poisons don't even need to be mentioned in the label, because in many stores they simply get the organic and non-organic vegetables from the same pile. And a long list of other reasons. For example, if you go to a healthy food store, there will be an entire section sugar-free. Sounds so healthy. But I wonder how many people realize that most of the sugar substitutes at such stands are way more harmful than sugar. And even the stevia, which is actually good, most of the so-called stevia sweeteners or sweet things, they just use the name of the plant, but the actual sweetener is a harmful chemical. And too many people are caught in this illusion that it is healthy for them to make some sort of balanced nutritional meals based on the daily recommended values on the labels of these things. If there were any real actual established daily values of given nutrition for the people, then those who are not getting such nutrition, which means quite large portion of the world's population, they should all be getting all these vitamins and nutrient deficiency sicknesses, which they don't. Nutrition has turned into obsession of throwing various substances in your stomach, hoping that they will change who you are. But the real valuable stuff, the plants from the forest, on the ones that you grow yourself with love, they are precious not because of the minerals or substances in them, so much as they are precious for their virgin genetic code and sacred energy patterns which have not yet been destroyed by the modern poisons. Eating is not just about putting amounts or loads of various chemical substances in your stomach, but it is also about connecting your consciousness with that of the plants which you ingest. For example, I'm kind of vegetarian, and luckily I live at the edge of a forest, so there is plenty for me to graze. But in case of emergency situations, let's imagine there is shortage of food, I would prefer to actually eat meat of animals who have been raised humanely than processed vegetarian food from the store. And maybe somebody will argue that the ancient books on Ayurveda, they also focus mainly on the qualities of various foods. Yes, they did, but at that time they didn't have death towers around. They did not use refined sugar, nor did the society consist of cell phone zombies, alcoholic zombies, which are in the process of destroying their last few remaining brain cells in front of the TV. So they were truly holistic when they focused on that stuff at that time. But if we do not widen our angle now, when much bigger problems are on the horizon, our approach will not be truly holistic, even though we call it holistic. So in terms of the death towers, and especially the 5G towers, now is the time to act. Certain communities have managed to stop them with petitions, and the time to do it is before they build them. As you know, once they build them, it will be much harder to make them dismantle them with petitions. Not to mention that what they do sometimes is they say, okay, we stopped it because of your petition, but actually the tower still functions. And then in that situation, there is nothing to officially petition against, since the tower is officially not even existent as 5G tower. At the places where the petitions were successful, that was not because those who introduced them have some mercy upon us, but because the people in those areas managed to actually build with the power of their intention a magical shield around their area. The technology of the death towers is in no way different than what in old texts is called black magic, invisible wavelengths which allow you to manipulate the consciousness of the victim. So the way to deal with black magic is to create your own protection shield. So some communities had success in tackling the problem with the towers by petitions, not because those who are behind the towers have any respect for civil law, but because everything and everybody in this world functions on the basis of the laws of the all-pervasive consciousness. And the basic of this law is that everything is intention driven. Exactly like the migrating birds, with full confidence, they embark on a difficult journey to other continents, which in some cases they have not even seen in their lives. And yet at the end, they do reach their destination. So there was a lot more material that I was planning to include in this video, but it is getting kind of too long. So I guess I'll include that material in the future video or videos on practical healing, which I may decide to make even in the very near future, depending on how this video is accepted by you. The Seth books from which I've been showing quotes in this video are available for free in PDF formats on internet and in audio format on the Team Heart channel.